Welcome to The Long View, a podcast that takes a closer look at the games people play. The Long View is now a proud member of Punchboard Media. Go there to find all kinds of content from Mile High Game Guys, Low Player Count, What Did You Play This Week podcast, Katie's Game Corner, and a ton of content for board games. Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table.
Do you like Sturf? I'm sure you like Sturf. Do you like buying board games? Well, you're here, so I'm sure you like buying board games. And since the Longview is sponsored by Game Surplus, you can save 10% on the Longview podcast picks. That's less money you get to spend to buy more stuff at a time. Isn't that amazing? All you have to do is enter the code the Longview Picks. And then you can save more money to buy more Sturf until your house is full of board games.
The Long View is also supported by our listeners. If you have a board game you're passionate about, if you have a board game you want to discuss, if you have a board game that is currently consuming all of your free time, thoughts, and energy, contact us. You can find us at longview@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter as The Longview Podcast. You can also find us on Board Game Geek Guild 1325. Get a hold of us. We'd love to talk about your favorite board game. In this episode of The Long View, me and Joe, along with Whitney and Wes, discuss all things Seven Wonders, including most of the expansions in Seven Wonders Duel.
And be sure to check out their website, hexagamers.com. It has reviews and other stuff. Go check it out. It's swag.
Just went recently to a showing for the first time, like a group showing at a community theater of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And she that was quite an interesting thing for me to see, and she was super uncomfortable. We won't talk about this. We're a little bit late even on our own schedules. Not a big deal, except I'm sorry, Mur. But
Please forgive us.
please forgive us. Hello and welcome to the Longview Podcast, in which we take an in-depth look at games that have stood the test of time. Today's game will be none other than the drafting classic Seven Wonders with a nice little civilization theme. We are joined by extra special guests making their podcasting audio debut, Whitney and Wes from the Hexagamers. Whitney, Wes, how are y'all tonight?
We're great.
Good, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Yes, welcome. Welcome to the Longview. So I'm really excited. We're going to be touching on a lot of different topics here because Seven Wonders has been around long enough to have 3 expansions, if you don't count the smaller bits and pieces they've released on the side, together with an entire spin-off for 2 players and an expansion to that. So we have no dearth, no shortage of content to keep us talking all night about Seven Wonders. I'm also joined, as always, by TC Reed, my partner in crime. How you doing, TC?
Sup, Joe? Good to be here.
Single-handedly keeping Portland weird by watching all 6 Chucky movies.
With my 7-year-old.
All right, we have listeners that are going to take care of that DHS call now. So, yeah, that's TC. You're wonderful. If you've ever watched any of the other content that me and TC put out together, TC is now a full member of the other podcast, The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, that kind of takes more of a topical view on different things. We've had the gaming family, the Reed family, which is very much into gaming. His wife Carissa, his daughter Kate. You guys, you really keep Portland weird on the table for sure.
Yeah, my daughter's still killing me at Legend of the Five Rings with her a unicorn clan. Dear God, I hate unicorns right now.
And you had quite an interesting find today that you were telling me, right, TC, about your thrifting?
Yeah, with thrift shopping, I found an actual functional stop thief game from 1979 with the what is it called? The electronic crime scanner. Actually still works in this thing. Saturday's going to be a good night tonight.
My students, as a high school teacher, my students laugh at me when I show them a picture of an old Nokia phone that I use for an activity in class. That thing, that's a dinosaur right there. That should have like a cord on it. It has to plug in, right? It's a plug-in thing?
No, it runs off a 9-volt battery of all things.
Wow, that's not too bad then. Yeah, if it was any sort of a
Remember those
plug-in
old,
battery, that would not work.
Those old Mattel like football games from the 80s with like the
Yes.
little LED. This is pretty much the same thing, except it makes these weird noises.
It's a
Like
classic.
it's supposed to be glass breaking, but it's not.
It's a
like
classic. Look forward to the long view of that. So I think Wes and Whitney, we already know your next episode of the long view going to be Stop Thief.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe
And
maybe
Mattel
not.
football for sure.
Yes, the
Well,
Mattel-
it's funny because they got Restoration Games just reprinted it, and I was like, well, maybe I should pick it up. And then I go to the thrift store. I'm like, nah, don't need to now. If this works, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you get to be the original
even better.
hipster. So, and for those of you that have not ever met me before, welcome to the Longview Podcast. My name is Joe Sallin. I am a co-host together with TC. I also do the good, the bored, and the ugly, and a little bit of a video review series called The Sallin Coefficient. Check anything I do out. I try to tweet about it on Twitter at @GoodBoredUgly. And if you are joining us here in YouTube, please keep coming with the comments here, Mur. We're going to be listening to things you have to say, and I will do my best to relay those sentiments and thoughts and comments and questions, complaints and grievances to Wes and Whitney as we keep this episode rolling. So, Wes, Whitney, we're going to be talking about Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is kind of a staple. Would you guys consider it? And I'm sorry if I say, you guys, I mean, y'all are from Canada, and here, I feel like every time I say you guys, my mother-in-law in the back of my head says, we're not guys. So now I say
No
you all,
offense
because
taken.
my mother-in-law from Atlanta is you all. And then all my students look at me like, you say y'all? What? Where are you from? Anyhow, whatever, the two of you, would you consider Seven Wonders a gateway game?
No, honestly, I think it's a great game, and I think it's something that people should have in their collection. But when it comes to learning card drafting and deck building, I wouldn't go as complex as Seven Wonders. There's a lot going on. It's an amazing game, and there's a lot of amazing components about it. And like you said, it stands the test of time. But I think when you're looking at something that's going to introduce you to those elements, you need to go a little bit simpler.
Yeah, for sure. We've introduced some friends to it that maybe aren't into gaming as much as we are, and we got a lot of blank stares, and just trying to explain the basics of resource management. And it might be just a little bit advanced, just a little bit. Obviously, it's no.
Sushi Go is probably one of the basics. That's a good one to start with.
Yeah.
But yeah, we tried to introduce my mom to it, and she was like,
Nope.
I don't know. Nope, I'm done.
Just
I
shut
can't
down.
do it. Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah. So we kind of gave up age one. That was it.
Oh, it so mimics my experience with the game as well. I've heard it called a gateway game by people, and there's individuals that feel that it makes this perfect gateway game. I'd say more of a next step. Start with something simple, like you mentioned Sushi Go, and I've noticed a lot of frustrated early, inexperienced gamers will feel frustrated if this is their first step into gaming. There's some things about this where you can kind of get left in the dust if you don't understand the way that the resources work. And especially like a drafting game a lot of times involves knowledge of what is specifically in the deck. And that's not going to be, unless you go through all the cards, in which case, good luck remembering that.
Good luck.
Yeah. It's always interesting
Well,
to
that's
teach this one to first-time players because trying to explain how the sciences work is like teaching algebra to people who don't understand math.
So we've got squares over here, and then over here you've got sets.
Uh-huh. And it's just like just get this blank look. I'm like, just go for the blue cards with the. Don't worry about that.
You don't have to do any
Let's go with the straight points.
multiplication.
That'll be fine.
No exponents. You're all good there. There's some interesting exploration.
These are
here,
points.
though.
Points good.
Yeah, point's good.
I think that's kind of precisely why Sushi Go might be what I would suggest as well. Like, when somebody's going to bring up drafting. However, Seven Wonders is really pointed at for being kind of a quintessential drafting game because everything really is tied specifically to drafting. It isn't like you draft and then do this and then do this. A lot of games sort of adopted drafting. I wonder how much of that was in the wake of Seven Wonders. I think that, Seven Wonders is somewhat influential, but I think that might be even predating Seven Wonders, where drafting has been used to sort of balance what would otherwise be a random card draw. I think, though, that Seven Wonders is one of the first to really focus on the mechanic, explore the mechanic, have different sort of aspects to what you can do. And so that's what's made it such a classic game. And so that's what's kind of put it on our radar, right? That's what you guys, what you specifically, when I reached out to you and was like, what would be a good game to talk about on the podcast? What would you guys like to talk about? And it's like, well, there was this gaping hole where Seven Wonders should be, and I think that it's such an excellent one for us to discuss tonight. Would you please?
We agree.
Yay! All right, well, we can proceed with the episode. Great. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short episode. It would have been okay.
Yeah.
It would be very short.
It's great. Done.
Settled.
Yeah. Problem solved. Play Sushi Go and sit. No. So could you all tell us a little bit about your experience starting off with Seven Wonders and, a little bit about the game in general? I guess whenever we get around to it, just, you have the floor now to introduce the game, if you will, and tell us a little bit about what you think, Seven Wonders specifically does to distinguish itself from the crowd.
Do you remember the first time we played Seven Wonders? We were at our friend's house, and none of us had played it. And we were trying to learn, and it was all blank stares. And we were all trying to figure it out, and we ended up watching a YouTube video of it. Do you remember that?
Right, yeah.
And that was the best way, I think, for us to learn. It took us probably about half an hour, 40 minutes to figure it out. And once we played one round, we finally went, okay, light bulb goes on, and now we get how to play.
Yeah, once you get that initial feel for how the game flow works, not knowing what's coming up or not knowing the best strategies, it doesn't matter. You're going to learn over time. But yeah, definitely the YouTube video was a huge help, a huge boon to picking that game up.
And we loved it too. Like, we played once and figured it out, and then we went home and said, okay, we want to buy that game. And I think we went and bought it within the week. And we played it a lot. We played it so much, Wes and me, with the three-player variant, that we ended up setting a 45-second timer on our turns. Because we were just like, okay, we've played this game so much, and we have the Leaders expansion and we have the Cities expansion, both of which are amazing. But we know the game so well that we start to becoming crippled by your own decisions. So we were like, okay, 45-second timer, and then now it creates this new challenge. But we really love it as a game, and we introduced it to our friends, and now that they've picked it up, they love it too. They're like, we don't even know why we thought it was so complicated, because now we totally get it, and now we think it's an amazing game. And we try and play it with a lot of different people to introduce it, because, like you said, it's a great game to help introduce the mechanic of drafting to people who have started playing board games, and they kind of pick it up.
Yeah, but yeah, for me, it was Seven Wonders being a civilization themed game. I grew up playing Sid Meier's Civilization computer game, so this was kind of brought me back to that. I definitely like the aspect of building that civilization, managing resources, doing research, all that kind of fun stuff that this game brings to the table.
Yeah, I think there's some excitement there, being able to develop your own civilization, and every game it's completely different. Even if you're like, oh, this game I'm going to focus on science, sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes you have to adapt your game to war, you have to adapt your game to, your straight civic points, and it's kind of neat to see how your civilization changes through every single game that you play. And it's just a really neat game to look at your own strategies and figure out how you can adapt them to other games as well.
Absolutely. Really, I like how you mentioned that as you're playing the game, a lot of times you'll have to take a look at what's in front of you and then make the best call, because no two games are going to play out the same. Yes, you're going to choose a specific, or not necessarily choose, but there's a way of sort of randomizing what specific civilization you're going to be in charge of heading. We got variable player powers here. That's kind of a buzzword and kind of big for people looking for that. So that can be quite interesting. And your specific, the wonder that you construct, which is kind of how your civilization is different, together with, I think, a starting resource, that's going to really change the course of how you're going to play the game.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of sets up what strategy might be best for you. But not only that, especially in games with larger number of players, it's interesting to kind of see what everybody else is doing and trying to find that niche that nobody else has gotten to try and capitalize on say nobody picking science cards or nobody picking civic cards or whatever. Trying to figure out what the best strategy for you is, which might align with your strength as a civ, may not. I find that one of the fun or most enjoyable parts of the game.
Yeah, I think the different pathways to success, that's probably my favorite part of the game. Like, you play a lot of games and you have to get the most points and then you win. Well, that's great, and it's the same in Wonders. You have to get the most amount of points, but there's so many different ways to do that. You can get that through science, you can get it through war, you can get it through your civic buildings, you can get it through Wonders. There's so many different pathways to do it, and that's what's really neat about this game, and that's what I think we keep coming back to, and that's why people play it so much, because there's so many different options for you to explore.
So much replayability.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And then you add in expansions and whatnot, and you've got enough stuff that can change up the game quite a bit. So there's also, I think, an expansion that just adds like some extra player boards too. That's like it's of course got everybody's favorite mannequin piss.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's just a Wonders expansion.
Mm-hmm. And it's got
What was that? Sorry, Tasty?
I said there's also a Catan board.
Yes.
Civilization. Yeah. I've seen that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually bought all of the expansions we could. We don't have Babel yet, but we bought all the boards. We bought the extra cards. We bought the leaders and the cities as well, just to try and give it some different options and different things for us to play with. Because you don't have to play with leaders and cities all the time. You can sometimes play with just leaders or just cities.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Or just Babel.
Yeah, as long as you're still playing Mannequin Piss, it's all good. I just love playing that
Good Wonder.
It's like a statue in a garden, and you're playing that together with somebody playing the pyramids.
Yeah, I think the pyramids is probably our least favorite. You're like, well, because there's so many fun and exciting options with the other Wonders, and then you get this, and you're like, I don't want just
points.
Yeah.
Points.
Oh, yay, woohoo. Yeah.
You want something that's going to play with the system a little bit, something that's going to change your decision path and not just give you this sort of linear, this is points, okay, I'll take the points.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if I remember right, though, the boards are dual-sided, so if you want to change it up a bit, you just like flip it over from the A to B side and like, yep, this is going to be more interesting.
Yeah, it just adds to the replayability, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a little bit about how Seven Wonders takes drafting and sort of just put that on the map. Maybe in kind of a way it can be compared to Dominion. And I would almost say even let's keep going with metaphors here before we continue to talk about Seven Wonders. So if Dominion and Seven Wonders both kind of put these mechanisms on the map, they both stick around to this day. And they both have inspired sort of simplified spin-offs because they have quite a bit of crunchiness in them. And we've talked so far about Sushi Go in our chat. There was Between Two Cities mentioned as an interesting drafting game. And then Dominion has got, like, I would consider Ascension sort of like a simplified version of Dominion where you've got deck building, but it's all sort of random based on what cards are out. Your decisions are very filtered and you don't feel like, like you really had control over everything at each point. So I would say that in a lot of ways, Seven Wonders maintains its position because, as you mentioned, there's all these different strategies. But I would say as any great Euro, the person that wins is the person that's able to see the doors that are opening as everybody else's strategies are kind of solidified and they're stuck down paths. And you see a door open and then you find the path of least resistance that results in the most points.
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about specifically the drafting in Seven Wonders. When you take a card, when you get a hand of cards, you're going to be taking one card, and you've got some choices with what to do with that card. Would you like to expand on what specifically you can do every time you draft a card?
Basically, you have pretty much three options. One is to use, if you have the resources that the card's cost dictates, you can build that card and incorporate it into your civilization, gaining the benefit, whether it be points or something to give you more resources later, or part of science to also lead to points. You can also build a stage of your wonder, and you can also throw away that card, which could be strategic, but throw it away for coin, which might help you later on. But I think to expand on kind of the strategy of making that choice, it does come down to will this card, or is there a card in my hand that's going to benefit me greatly? Is throwing it away gonna benefit me later by having an extra coin? Do I need to build my stage of my wonder, or do I want to screw over the guy next to me because I know he wants this card? And all of those options might end up being the one that you choose that best suits your game in that scenario.
And that's something we find a lot too with the 3-player variant of Seven Wonders is, the 2-player variant of Seven Wonders is when you have the third ghost player. It becomes kind of a dumping ground for hate drafting, and that's when you take a card that you don't really want, but you don't want your opponent to have, so you just give it to the other player. And we do that a lot. We'll have to build a wonder, or we just go out of our way to really try and screw each other over because that's what we do. So we love each other a lot.
Hate drafting is a big part. Right? It's
Yeah,
not
it is.
be
It
all
really
end
is.
all though. The spotlight is not necessarily on it. I think it can become more that way at lower player counts. Now, I tend to like it when it's really balanced, like at about a 4-player count, 3 or 4, where you've got the ability to have an idea of what cards could be left in that hand. Because in a 7-player game, let's be honest here, it goes up to 7 players. That's awesome. But I'm not interacting in any way with the people that are all the way across the table from me. Like, it's so far to draft that I'm really not paying attention to what they are. And the only players I'm really paying that much attention to are my left and right.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I like the 4 and 5 player. I think that's the ideal number.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
So to compare what you guys were saying, so there's interesting decisions with each card. Like, cards are meaningfully different. It's not just like this card is a 4 strength, this card is a 5 strength. Another drafting game that came out recently and actually got quite a bit of attention is called Medieval Academy. And I was really disappointed when I played that because it was just like, okay, this is a pink card. If I want to take a pink card, there's a 4 and a 5 in this hand. There is no conceivable reason I would not take a 5. Like, it is, there's actually less choices than seen. Here in Seven Wonders, each of these cards does a kind of a different thing because you're not just drafting cards to get points. You're building a tableau that you're going to be continuing to benefit from or suffer from if you are anything like me when I play this game, or suffer from what my opponents have. As the game continues, you're going to play through 3 ages, right? So what kind of things can you expect to see from cards in Seven Wonders?
There's quite a few different cards, and they change a little bit through the ages, right? Because you play through 3 rounds. You've got age 1, age 2, and age 3. So not all the cards are going to be available in every age. And so you've got things like your resources. So you've got wood and ore and brick, and those are your resources that you can use to build or to draft other cards. And that comes into play, like you've got your civic, and civic is just straight points. But what's awesome about these cards is that they chain. So if you're building things like your points, or you're building your science cards, or you're building your war cards, it gives you a little preview on the card if it chains later on. So if you pick up that card, say if you pick up like a guard tower, it might tell you later on, okay, well, the walls are how it connects. So if you get the walls card later, then your walls card is free. So that's kind of cool. So you have to really kind of keep an eye on that when you're looking for your age 1, age 2, and age 3, especially if you're trying to keep an eye on your opponent too, because you know that they've built something and you don't want to give them that chaining card for free, because it can amass to 7 or 14 or 21 points depending on what pathway they've chosen.
Yeah, if like you were saying, you might have 2 cards that are just both points, but the one that has less points might lead to a card in a later age that is worth a great deal of points. So it might be worthwhile taking the lower point card to get that guaranteed, very expensive, very high point card in the later round.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much for giving an idea of what these different cards do. So we got things from just points to resources, and then cards actually have a cost, as you were mentioning. But there is a way for you to get a hold of resources that you don't just have from cards you have previously chosen, no?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So you can look to your neighbors and see what resources they have. And every wonder starts off with a resource or some coins if you're unlucky. But you can also buy the resources from your neighbors. And it really sucks having a neighbor that's like, oh, I get 4 coins to start, because that's one less resource for you that you can buy from them, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
So you can always buy from them. And it's extra coins, right? So you have to pay, I think, 3 coins to buy from your neighbors. But what's really awesome then is you get what's called commerce cards, and they're like trading posts or marketplaces, and they actually reduce the cost of you buying resources from your neighbor to your left or your neighbor to your right. So, you could buy brick or wood or stone for 1 coin less, or you could buy papyrus, glass, or the loom for 1 coin less as well. But then your neighbor has to have it. That's the only key rate, is that your neighbor has to have that resource that you have. If they don't have it and you don't have it, then you're kind of SOL.
Yeah, we've played a few games where something like glass wasn't available on either side of you, or in your own resource pool, and it kind of limits your ability to buy certain cards until you get some way to access glass or any other resource.
And it kind of almost seems like it can happen by no fault of your own sometimes. Just, people... Yeah. Because, our resource cards, do they actually pay off? Do you think that anybody can do well in a game of Seven Wonders without at least taking the resource card here, the resource card there?
It's really difficult. Like, I know we've played a couple of games where we just weren't able to get resources, or where you just had, maybe 1 wood and 1 stone. And it becomes really expensive to keep buying. So I find that you continually throw away cards to get more money. Hey. Yeah,
it's something that I've tried. Just in playing, since we've played so many times. I'll just try a strategy like no resources, or just a few resources, and just try and skim by on getting commerce cards that give me access to cheap resources, or chaining certain cards together. And sometimes it works. It really depends on what comes up, and it also depends on the other players. Are they spotting this, and are they counteracting? Are they throwing out those cards that are going to chain on your own ones that you're going to get for free, and you don't need those resources? And if they do that, then your strategy kind of gets stomped out.
But it's funny too. Like, if you draft too many resources, then you start missing out on other cards. So you have to find the balance of having enough resources, but not too few and not too many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you just have all of the resources, you become this. I've seen people end the game with $30, and usually that's not a great sign, because
no.
You kind of want to be running a tight economy. You want to be able to get the cards that are worth all the points, and not just let your opponents have access to whatever they want. Especially if they've got these. As soon as your opponent lays down one of those commerce cards, that should be kind of a sign to you that, hey, they're not going to be really rewarding me enough. They're going to be paying me a fair price for these resources. So there's every little system in the game, because there is quite a bit of little systems, the way things work, that causes this to not be that great of a gateway game. But each one of them is sort of played with by what the cards do. Yes?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And not only that, but I think that's part of the balance in the game, is that it's very difficult to starve everybody out of resources, because they can pick up those commerce cards that give them access to your vast resources for very cheap. That's part of the way that these strategies are balanced, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, it's nice getting the 2 coins. Like I think I said earlier, 3 coins. It's 2 coins to buy from your neighbor. It's nice getting those 2 coins, but by the same token, if your neighbor has the 1 less, like a marketplace, and they're only giving you 1 coin, then it's not really serving you later on in the game. 1 coin isn't going to buy you anything.
Yeah, it's really helping them more than it's helping you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So one thing that I find nice about this that you'd alluded to is that we've got chaining of different buildings. Like if I build a building in age 1, it will say at the bottom what buildings in age 2 it will chain from. And this is all made possible because these decks are sorted specifically into Age 1, Age 2, and Age 3. What do you guys what do you feel about this decision to filter what cards are available at each time? Because this is something that is not present in every game that involves drafting.
Yeah, well, I think it's important in this game in particular because the Age 3 cards are quite expensive when compared to the Age 1 cards. Most of the Age 1 cards don't cost more than one coin, if that. Most are free. So having that progression of as you gather more and more resources, the cards that you're going to be drafting become more and more expensive. That kind of makes sense to me. You know, as your civilization and in the theme of civilization, as things progress, things get more expensive. You're building greater and greater things, and so not only does that make sense in terms of the game, it makes sense in terms of
the theme.
The theme, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, executing the theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, your civilization is growing. So we've also got war abstracted in this game, and it's quite abstracted.
Yeah, it is. And you know, honestly, I'm going to tell you, I hate war in this game. It's very effective, and it's very important in some aspects, in some areas, but I hate it. It's such a freaking pain to have to pay attention to war, because I don't really like to build war cards. I like to focus on science, or I like to focus on civic and commerce. And then Wes will be like, here's 2 shields. And I'm just like, mother F, now I have to go and find a freaking war card and play it, because now I'm going to start losing points later on in the game if I don't pay attention to the strategy, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the balance, right? It you know, when somebody's kind of running away with the game because they're getting all of the civic cards, or they're getting just the right science cards, you can start dropping war cards that can kind of force them to make certain moves and drop some of their other strategy, and I think that's another key that makes this game so great, is that, you know, even when luck is kind of in somebody's favor, it doesn't mean they're going to win, because there are so many other options to victory.
Hey, you were talking about not liking war there, Whitney.
Yeah.
Is it with one of the expansions you can get like a little dove to put out of you, and you're like, no, you're not attacking me, you're attacking the person to my left.
You can
go eat a brick.
Yeah, it's with cities. It's with the
diplomacy,
cities expansion. Yeah, we love it, actually. I think it's really neat that they do that. One of our last games that we played, we did the 2-player variant, so we had the third player was drafting all of these war cards. And I ended up picking up a diplomacy card, and that just means that player isn't in war for that round. So I played the diplomacy token, or the diplomacy card, for the third player, and then all of a sudden, all of these war cards that they drafted were completely useless, and it was awesome. Wes was kind of pissed off, I think, but I was like, yes, this was the best move ever, because I didn't lose, 5 points.
Yeah, my wonder in that game gave me one of the stages gave me diplomacy, so I was hoping to be able to use the third player to attack Whitney, and then she just took him out of the play. So.
Yeah, I was actually playing Seven Wonders a few years ago with that expansion, and I was just hammering the person to my left with war, and he threw that out, and I ended up hitting my wife instead. I was like, oh no. She didn't take that person.
She's your wargaming partner, TC. She was fine.
I know. It's just kind of like this inadvertent, what's that bird do? Oh, it means I hit my wife instead? Oh, she's going to love this.
She was probably sitting there on your shoulder
like, that's actually really cool.
Attack him, yeah. TC. And then all of a sudden it's like, TC, you're not supposed to attack me.
What you attack?
What have you done?
Yeah, that's dynamic, that's for sure. So my view of the war is that it's kind of like doing the wave. Like, we all kind of stand up, and it's a bit like an arms race, right? Like, if I get one war, you need one war. And the game specifically snowballs to where your Age 1 cards have only one symbol, your Age 2 have 2, and then Age 3 has got 3. So it's like, even if you were the best at war in Age 2, you're going to be stuck with, opponents that can easily jump up on you, as you would expect, as technology is increasingly becoming more and more efficient at developing ways to, kill and dismember and do awful things to your opponents and other civilizations. So it's got an interesting sort of flow that I think that to really win at war, you just need to have opponents that aren't paying any attention to the fact that you have only like one more than they have. So like that's the real winner, because if I get a bunch of war, you get a bunch of war, we're next to each other, we are kind of doing the whole MED, mutually insured destruction.
Yeah, and I think some of the best wars that we've had too are when we're kind of doing that back and forth. Okay, I've got 2, and now you have 2. Okay, I have 3, and now you have 3. And then all of a sudden, the last card you pick up, you're like, oh yes, I have a war card, and they don't have anything, and you play it, and it's just like, flip the board. I was doing so good, and then you just messed it all up.
Yeah, and I find the kind of further to what you were mentioning about everybody one-upping each other. I find it does end up being like a wave where one player decides, I'm going for war, and then their neighbors have to go for war, and then their neighbors have to go for war to kind of catch up, and it's just like this wasted effort because everybody picks up a 1 war card and then it becomes null.
Yeah, nothing happened.
It would have just been better just to not pick any war cards at all.
The war never becomes an issue if someone throws down that first war card and everyone's like drafting those things like crazy when they come around. Like, oh, here comes TC. Yeah, there's my 3 war thing. Ha ha ha. Oh crap.
How do you all feel about the decision to make war worth points in the positive to the player that's winning the war, but to put a governor on only -1 point regardless? Like you're talking about, like, it's winning a war is worth 1 point, then 3 points, and then 5 points respective versus, depending on the rounds. However, the negative points do not continue to scale. Is that something that you all feel is a valid point there, or do you think that's something that just makes the war a little bit less enticing?
Yeah, it definitely makes it a little bit less enticing, but I couldn't imagine the devastation of getting hit on both sides, losing every battle, and effectively you would be losing 18 points by losing out on war. I think it definitely it makes it okay to just give up on war at some point, which is okay. I think if you were forced, like if somebody could go war against you on either side, or 2 players on either side, if you go just all out war and effectively nullify your game, I think that would be less enjoyable for that person. So that governor kind of stops that from happening, and I think that's valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also part of your strategy too, though. When you're kind of battling war and you see people start drafting war cards, it becomes a decision for you. Like, okay, is this going to be something that I want to pursue? Do I want to start drafting war cards, or do I want to take a strategic hit right now?
Mm-hmm.
Can I take 3 points against me, or 5 points, or 6 points against me, and still do okay? Can I still win this game if I don't draft war?
Mm-hmm. That is an interesting perspective. Yeah, like it's, your decision is more tied to the specific mechanisms of the game and whether or not it's worth it to you to keep this war going. And I would say that if you got an opponent to your right that keeps on like snowballing up their war, and they've got an opponent that is actually competing with them, then ultimately taking each other out while you're sitting there like, yes, you're losing a point every round, and theoretically they're getting an extra 5 from you, like they're getting more and more from you. But like if they're distracted by that, there's an awful lot that you can take care of, especially if they're wasting their hate drafting opportunities, taking cards, these war cards, when they could be taking the science cards. Because in my experience, science is a bit sneaky. We talked about how complicated it is because, like a blue card, a civic card comes into your face and you're like, woo, tasty, 7 points. And it's pretty obvious how much it's worth. When you get science, whoo, that can be scary. I've seen games won on science alone. How do you all feel about the way science works in the game?
I like it. I find that it's like you said, right? It can only really become a big factor if people aren't paying attention, or if they're distracted by, say, war. If somebody's just sneakily collecting those science cards, I mean, they can really rack up points. I've been in games with like 5 or 6 or 7 people where somebody got, I swear it was like 40 plus, 50 plus points just from science alone. And I mean that they ended up winning the game because everybody else was was too preoccupied with war or some other strategy, and they kind of just snuck in behind the scenes because, yeah, those big points aren't staring you in the face. It's all behind that algorithm, and you got to keep on that and kind of monitoring what their points are actually going to be ending up based on what they have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're the one responsible for balancing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, I just find it really challenging when you're looking at science cards because like you said, you have these beautiful civic cards where it's like, oh, I get 7 points. That's amazing. 7 points right away. Or you have to look at these science cards and go, okay, now I have to start doing math. And there's a lot of people, including me, whose math isn't their strong suit, so you kind of have to start calculating in your head. Okay, so I have a triplicate, or I get a set, which is, 7 points, and then, plus every card is worth 1 point each, unless you have a pair or a triplicate, and you have to start squaring them. So then you're trying to do all this math in your head, trying to figure out, if I draft this one science card, is it going to be worth more to me than this straight 7 points? And it gets complicated that way. And like one of the last games Wes and I played, I had, 8 science cards or something, and I had 25 points from 5 cards that were the same symbol. And Wes was sitting there doing the math for me, and I was like, okay, sure, I'm going to trust you because I'm totally lost here. Like, there's just so many points. But I think it's a really cool mechanic of the game.
Yeah, it definitely sets it aside or apart from other card drafting games in that there's this weird mechanic that you have to kind of pay attention to.
Definitely. I would say that science is sneaky. It's got a weird way to score. It's tough for new players, but it gives an extra step that pushes this beyond Gateway, but it also pushes this into the realm of like a game that you can sink your teeth into. So before we go any further, regarding all these different little aspects, right? Civil cards, science, war, lot of resources.
Too, yeah.
Economic cards, all these things are just little pieces that come together to call to mind a civilization type game. And when I say a civilization game, there's like a whole, I would call this almost a genre in and of itself, of games in which a player takes control of a civilization and plays them throughout going through the wheels of time. Now, there's lots of different complexities of civilization games. I got my first start like playing computer games with Sid Meier's Civilization, and that's a really cool game that's even based on a board game. And now since then, there's been a game based on the board game or on the video game that's based on the board game. And anyway, Civ is a really interesting category. But I had a opportunity to talk a little bit with my little brother, who's not in it. He's not like a really heavy in-depth gamer. He doesn't really seek out gaming. He's more of a gamer by osmosis sort of gamer, but he knows way more than any random person should because of me. And yeah, I'm an overbearing older brother. So I posed this question to him about civilization games and whether or not Seven Wonders categorized as a Civ game. He told me he really didn't think so. He's played some pretty complex games, like I said. I think he's played on the level of Clash of Cultures, and he's played the Civ video game quite a bit, so much that he can almost say Baba Yetu, the Our Father in Swahili, that song. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all playing through your heads. You're welcome. No sleeping tonight. It's a good song, though.
Yeah,
so
it's a good song.
he told me he didn't think it was a Civ game. And I don't know where I stand on this, but I'd like to pose that to you, Wes and Whitney. How do you feel about whether or not it's a Civ game? And TC, once they get done, you tell me as well.
Okay.
So I'll start up here. So I'm also a big Sid Meier's Civilization fan. I haven't played the latest, the version 6 yet, but
6, me neither. Nope.
Yeah, I'm like on the level
4
of
is still
probably,
kind of the best, right? Isn't 4 the best, or are
4 is
you
my
one of
favorite?
those?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right. Well,
4 is my favorite for sure. Yeah, actually, Whitney and I got Whitney to buy 4 as well, so that we could play multiplayer together. And when you convinced your girlfriend at the time when we did this, is when you can convince your girlfriend to play a computer game, I think the game's pretty darn good. So
success. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I'm pretty comfortable with what would be called a civilization game. And I do think that Seven Wonders is a civilization game. It might border on just being a Civ themed game, but it is. You are taking control of a civilization. You're building resources. You're building your structures. You're controlling you're kind of micromanaging the city. You're building it to get points and ultimately take your civilization to victory. And I mean, I liken it to say music genres. There's always instances where it blurs the lines, and I think this is one of those where this is a civilization game. It's also a Civ themed game. It's a card drafting game. It's a collection of all things like that, but it definitely is a civilization game in my mind.
Yeah, I don't agree. And surprising there.
There's a couch for that.
Yeah. I think it's more of a Civ theme game. For me, it's like, we're likening it to Civ 4. I love Civ 4, and I think it's really cool. I think one of the most interesting parts about Civ 4 is the settlers part of it. You get to go and explore new lands and meet barbarians and probably die, but you get to do these cool things. Whereas in Seven Wonders, you're taking control of this so-called civilization, but you're an omnipotent being, right? You're the only one there. You're building and you're playing God and you're getting to play war and do all these neat little things and build stuff, but you don't have settlers, you don't have workers, you don't have guards or soldiers, you don't really have any of this. Like, you've got that element in the card, but you don't have the people who are growing your city, who are making your city evolve into this big structure. It's flat for me in that regard. I love it, and I mean flat as in you're the only one there. It's like me being in the city by myself.
You want like a map.
You're mapping it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I've seen. Others kind of espouse is that they need a map for it to be a Civ game, and I agree that makes it more Civ-like, but I don't think that's a criteria.
I just think it's the lack of people for me. That's the biggest element. There's nobody there except for you.
Yeah, but the cards are an abstraction of that concept, right? Like when you build a lumber yard, there are workers there
I don't know.
chopping down trees so that you can build your marketplace or whatever it is.
Maybe you need like a plastic miniature to sit, like this. Now
Yeah.
take the plastic miniature for your quarry worker and put it on the card. Okay, it's a Civ game.
Then it's a Civ game. Then it's a Civ game.
I need them equal.
Take your little sword band and put him on top of the card. No, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the term abstraction, because abstraction, at some point every board game deals in abstraction, unless you're going to literally hand people swords. It's, at some point there is an abstraction of what's happening in conflicts and resource gathering. That's a really interesting topic. TC, have you had some time to mull this one over?
Oh yeah, I had to answer straight off. I consider Seven Wonders a Civ game as much as I consider Race for a Galaxy a space game. I
feel like we're going to hear some belittling things.
No, I love both
topic
games.
Here.
I love both games, but for me, Seven Wonders doesn't quite feel like a Civ game because you're restricted on who you're interacting with and who you're fighting. You're only I've played it with 7 people. My biggest complaint is I just can't reach across the table and say, "Hey, I'm fighting you." It's like, no, you are limited by the rules on who you're interacting with, and that limitation, to me, doesn't make it quite a civilization game. You don't have quite the freedom.
A map would do the same thing, though, wouldn't it? Wouldn't a map limit who you can interact with? Because geography.
Well, you can it depends on the layout of the map. I mean, in Civilization,
if you're a landlocked country,
there's that. You can build, you can get technology to get around that and fling around and build an airplane to fly over everyone and start bombing the crap out of someone just because you don't like them.
We all know what TC wants to do. Yes, TC. TC is the reason that war in this game only gives you -1 to lose. Yes, it's like TC.
But
Seven Wonders needs nukes, and then it'll be a Civ.
But it's such a fantastic.
That's a really interesting idea, though.
Yeah, it's such a fantastic thing to throw on top of the game because it's a huge selling point for the game. You start adding leaders and cities, and it's abstracted, but you're building. I mean, it's not more so a civilization game. It's like I'm trying to build a wonder, right? I'm like, dude, if I can build a wonder in this game, it's fantastic. I'm like, yay, I built my wonder.
You know what's an interesting topic though, and this just like hit me, and I'm sure that like it's something that I'm just so thick-headed I didn't notice. It's, this is entirely focused in the ancient times. So I mean, like your nukes, like you're still building the Colossus in round 3, right? I mean, you're not going to be leaving ancient times. So your ability to leave your specific area and interact is maybe specifically tied to that. Though, I mean, Alexander the Great did a hell of a job not staying in his home territory. So there's a lot of different angles here.
Yeah, but as far as
that might be kind of a cool idea. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You're the
so
guest.
What is the next one? TC's going to design the next 7 wonders. It's going to be like, 7 wonders of the modern world. Nuke. Yeah.
Well, here's what happened with 7 Wonders is that 7 Wonders, me and Chris, we played the bejesus out of this game, and we loved it, and we still like it to a large extent. But what happened with 7 Wonders is it led us to other Civilization games. For example, I don't know if you know this, the designer of Here I Stand, Ed Beach, he was a lead designer on Civilization 6. And a lot of the frustrations he had with that game, he threw into Here I Stand, because up until Civilization 7 or 8, there was no religious conflicts in a Civilization game. So he designed a board game with that system in mind. And so, we went from like Here I Stand to this monster of a war game thing. And Carissa just lost her mind. She was right up her alley, her time frame and everything. So but it was a good jumping off point to discover what other games that we would be interested in.
Nice.
Yeah, and it might be kind of an interesting expansion for Repos Production to explore is what you're saying, TC, is you can't reach across the table and engage in war with somebody else. So maybe that could be a cool idea for an expansion is they have cards that you can incorporate that allow you to engage in war with somebody who else is somebody you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. Like I don't know how that card would look, but it might be kind of
an idea there, Whitney, if you
random.
If you don't mind. The expansions actually, in a way, the most recent expansion, Babel, which I think, as you mentioned, like is not exactly available to you.
We haven't tried it.
Yeah, we haven't tried it yet.
So
it's
what
good.
that
we
one
like
did, it involved the collective building of the Tower of Babel, which was essentially a board on which there were 4 rules. It's basically 4 rules, and you've got the same sort of drafting. So you're still drafting these, but you draft these tiles at the beginning of the game that each have a different rule on it. And as I recall, you draft, I think, 4 of them or 3 of them. It's like you draft 4, but you can only ever play 3. I think it's something like that. Every time that you use this tile, which is going to be placed on a separate board, like a Babel board, it changes the rules for everybody at the table. So you're able to interact, but it's very much still in a 7 Wonders spirit, because I think the ability to do what TC wants to do, which is rip across the table, grab your possession, and slide. Yes, just that to me would be outside of the spirit here, because I think this is a very much, as TC mentioned, like this got you kind of started on Civ games, because it does feel like a Civ game, but it's very much like Euroized mechanisms. It doesn't feel in any way like like any decision you make in the game is necessarily the make or break. Everything is kind of like, is this going to be worth more to me, more to my opponent, a few points here, a few points there. Everything is just kind of, like it's a game that's won by degrees and not necessarily by huge sweeping booms.
Well, to be honest, if I'm wanting that type of game, I got other games that are going to do that. I don't know, like Time of Crisis, if I want to get in someone's face.
Dozens.
Your
whole collection, team.
Yeah, but but there are times where we're dealing with people who don't want that level of direct interaction and want to feel a little safe, their own thing. And, it's a great compromise game to pull out. I'm like, hey, you don't want to feel aggressive. You want to do a little light Civ game? Let's break this out. We can do it in about an hour or so, and you'll be happy doing your own thing, and it may lightly smack you from my left or lightly smack you from my right. But you only lose a point or 2 at the most. Don't worry about it too much.
So
sometimes that can be taken as a very big sign of aggression. I think it was when we were playing with Ryan and Caitlin. I laid down the war card, and this was not taken too lightly by Caitlin.
Yeah, Caitlin was pretty angry.
And then there was an arms race for the rest of because she was trying to like, oh really? Like, okay. So yeah, that there can be some aggression.
Mm-hmm. So in Babel, you've got everybody sort of working on these rules together, and the reason I mentioned that it's more interactive is that with less players, you play with less rules that are available at each time because you start covering things up. I don't think I mentioned that, but when I build this new section of the Tower of Babel, it'll cover up the old one at some point. If people are doing that, and the more of these that you build, the more points you get. So you are just in general, the game. In a way, it felt a little shoehorned in. It felt kind of like, oh, here's this. It can give you all these points, and it's like, well. It feels like this is just, kind of a changing rules. And I think that gave, a lot of people complain the same way TC's, along those lines of you can't really interact with people across the table from you. Well, this is this place where we can change the collective rules as the game goes on. However, if all 4 people build, if you're playing with 5 people and 5 people build on Babel the same turn, first person just got their rule covered up before it went into effect. So
and plus Babel is 2 expansions in one. And I actually like the other expansion that came with that one, where you put that big rule in the middle, and you all have to pay in to make. If you don't pay in, like
great projects
starts happening to you. It's like this humongous piece of cardboard you just slap in the middle.
More collective responsibility, though. More collective responsibility, just like the Babel board. That's great that you bring that up because that is, it's this gigantic card, and you're going to be putting your marker on it when you contribute to it, and that means you're going to get a bonus when it gets completed. But if it doesn't get completed, anybody without a marker gets hit. So it's kind of an interesting collective responsibility. I think Babel is the answer to the people that complain that there's not any interaction in it. Now, if you don't like the interaction in Babel, which I think still, TC, it's not going to come anywhere close to what you're looking for. But if you don't if you don't feel that the interaction in Babel works, then that might be, then Seven Wonders would probably feel less like a Civ game and more like a Euro game to you.
Yeah, like I said, I don't mind breaking it out for people who want to play something a little lighter. And I think there's some 7-year anniversary stuff coming out for it as well. I think
there were more boards, as I recall. It was mainly more boards. There might have been a few cards here and there. But we haven't talked about the other 2 expansions. So you'd mentioned leaders, you mentioned cities. Wes and Whitney, would you like to tell us a little bit about why you would choose to play or not to play with those and what they add?
You know what? We like them both, and I think you could play the base game without leaders and without cities, because it's still quite a challenging game. You're still looking at the same pathways. You're still trying to solve the same issues of, should I play war or should I play science? What I like about cities is it adds that diplomacy that we were talking about. So you can, if your partners are engaging in war, then you don't necessarily have to be part of that. So that's kind of a cool aspect of it too. And I also like the extra cards it adds in. I find with leaders and cities both, the scoring in the games becomes pretty outrageous. I think one of our last games was 82 to 71 or something like that. It's crazy how high your points get, and it's because of the extra coins and the extra abilities that you get out of those cards. So with leaders, it's kind of neat, and it's hard too. You get 4 leaders cards, and then you can only really draft 3. You draft 1 before the end or before the start of each age, and then you have to have the coins for that. And Wes and I have done that a lot, where we're playing, and then we get to the end of the age, and we have 1 coin, and we're like, "Son of a! I don't have my coins for my leader that was going to change the game." I just did that recently, where I forgot to save 4 coins for my tablet, which was one of my leader cards, and then I couldn't triplicate my science cards, so I really effed myself out of some points. So that's kind of neat, and you get these little bonuses and stuff out of the leaders, and I find it kind of labels your strategy. I think for me, leaders tends to label the direction you're going to go, and that really gives you insight into how the other player is going to play their game, and that kind of gives you an advantage in that way, where you can start adapting your game to kind of maybe screw them out of some cards that they want.
Yeah, I like leaders because you get at the beginning of the game you get to draft those 4 cards, those 4 leaders, but you get to draft them in secret. So I find that you can start to build a bit of a strategy before the game even begins, and that strategy can remain hidden until you reveal your card at the beginning of whichever age the one card that really does reveal your strategy is played. So I kind of like that aspect to it. It also adds a lot of variation to the game that the base game didn't have. But I mean, it adds another kind of dimension to the game, which I think is pretty great. Cities, I've played less of Cities, but so far I agree with Whitney. The ability to add diplomacy really does add some benefit, because you can really mess up somebody's strategy if they are going for war. You can basically nullify that if you get the right cards. But definitely the other aspect of Cities, which is debt. Honestly, in all the games we played, we never encountered any debt. It was an interesting thing, is that we've never gone into debt. Like some of the cards will have, or some of the cards that come with Cities will when you play them will cause everybody else to lose money, and that in the form of debt if they don't have the coin to pay it, or if they choose not to pay it. Yeah. But it seems like a damaging thing to take on, and so we've never taken it on, and it's never really come into play, actually. So
I think that debt, I don't know, in the games I've played of Seven Wonders with the Cities expansion, debt almost feels like it came out nerfed. Like it came out feeling like, they must have play tested this, and this is all the more debt they could cause, because otherwise, I feel like what's dangerous about debt probably in development is that people can end up in this situation where, they played a big points card, they're sitting there without any real economy, and then boom, debt. All right, 2 turns now just to get back to, normal, back to where you want to be. So it felt like maybe it could hurt too much in some situations, and as a result, it felt like whoever played the debt cards ended up later on not doing very well in the games I played. I don't know, just my experience.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's a big thing too, because if you're taking debt, then it's victor points against you at the end of the game, right? But I think too, another big part of Cities is the science. Like they've got the little mask symbol, and that can copy science from one of your neighboring cities, and that's another huge part of it too. Like,
so you can't just hate draft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Cities, I find there's a lot of just extra points. Like I feel like a lot of the cards are just, here's a little bonus, and it kind of replicates Duel for me. Here's extra points.
Ooh, here's great transition, because we have talked about all the expansions here and kind of the extra boards. So yeah, a little smattering of everything went into Duel, huh?
Yeah, I think so. And like Cities is a cool expansion, but I think it's just really the diplomacy, the science, and the debt that are the major parts of it. Whereas everything else, I find they kind of took those elements and then they made it into Seven Wonders Duel, which is the 2-player game.
Yeah, definitely Duel. When we got that, it kind of supplanted the 2-player variant of Seven Wonders. I find that that Duel is a much better 2-player game than Seven Wonders for sure. Partially because I think Whitney and I, when we started, or as we got like really into Seven Wonders, in the 2-player variant, it just ended up being like that third player, that ghost player, just became this dumping ground and for hate drafting. We kind of learned each other's strategies, and it just whoever was able to manipulate the third player the best won the games, and so Duel kind of allowed us to break out of that into a proper 2-player kind of Seven Wonders experience.
I also pointed out to Wes, though, that I found we stopped playing Seven Wonders right around the time when I started getting really good at the 2-player variant, and I started beating him all the time. And then it was like,
lies,
look, I found this Pantheon. It's a 2-player game. Let's play this instead. And it's like, okay, sure.
Well, history is written by the victor.
Yeah.
So what I see here in Duel, because Duel is quite an interesting little anomaly. We're talking about a small 2-player game that has dominated the Board Game Geek charts, as in, like, it is much surpassed the original Seven Wonders. And it's gone up. What is it like? Is it in the top? It's in the top 20. I think it was at number 12 or something last I checked. But we're talking about Seven Wonders Duel, the 2-player spinoff designed by
9.
Is it 9? So
Wow.
we're talking top 10
Wow.
game of all.
Seven Wonders is
here.
at 37. So yeah, it's like rocketed past it.
All right, weird
Yeah.
question here, guys. Have you ever played Seven Wonders Duel, gone back to playing Seven Wonders, and then felt like, I wish they could kind of find a way to incorporate something they changed about Seven Wonders and Duel into the original Seven Wonders, and then have like a new edition that incorporates anything like that? If so, what piece would it be?
That's a really good question. I've never really looked at it that way, but you know what? I was kind of wishing for more wonders. Like when we were setting up for Seven Wonders after we were playing Seven Wonders Duel, I'm always like, oh, okay, how are we setting up the wonders? Oh, right, we only get one. Okay, so forget the choosing, we just get whatever's random out of the deck. And I mean, I understand why Seven Wonders is that way, but I love the wonders aspect of it, and I think it'd be kind of neat to be able to build more than one wonder, or even have the choice of building maybe 1 or 3 wonders that are in your civilization.
That's
I
interesting.
want bigger cards in Duel.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
tiny
the small
cards
cards.
up
Yeah.
the wall. Like, if I
Yeah.
have the bigger
Yeah, they're
cards
tiny.
that are in Seven Wonders, I would be so happy. But I've got those little Hobbit cards.
Yeah.
I'm like, this.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Seven Wonders itself, you end up with like 20 of these giant cards in front of you. It turns into quite a space hog. Like, I very frequently have placed cards on top of other cards and later on forgotten I had those cards underneath.
Yeah,
So
I almost did that the last game. I moved something and I was like, oh, that's major points that I need later on. Good to know.
So one of the main things that Duel does is it turns all these different aspects that are getting you essentially points in Seven Wonders, and it turns them, instead of their, sort of quantified point system that you get from Seven Wonders original, here now a lot of these aspects have been turned into a race of sorts, where there is a goal to hit. Your wonders themselves are a race of sorts, Once a certain amount of wonders, there will be one player who can't build all their wonders. So you've got to kind of race, like, who's going to be the person that builds 4 while the other person's only building 3. You're still Seven Wonders, right? And there's actually 7 wonders in every game, unlike, a less than 7-player game. What any other things you guys can think of that would go
like
along?
the way the war works in Seven Wonders Duel, where you can just win the game if you just peg that track out.
And then we see debt as well.
Yeah.
We see debt tokens that are being employed in Seven Wonders Duel as well. In war.
Yep. Yeah, it's breaking the bank. That really sucks when you move the war track up to a certain point and then the other player starts losing coins.
Yeah.
That hurts a lot. That's
Okay.
really, really crappy.
Yeah.
Really choke you, yeah. So,
yeah, but it's a really good element of the game.
yes, I agree. I'm right there with you. I mean, I don't know if it's clear, but I'm a big fan of tense type games. So when I say this can choke you, to me that's like, yes, choke me. That's right. I get it. Okay, whatever. But one of my favorite aspects, to move along from that topic, I think we get the point. One of my favorite things in Seven Wonders Duel is the way they did science. Like, science here, instead of it being this complicated, you score squares, you score sets, here you've got, if you can literally just win the game outright if you can get one of every type of symbol. But they don't really do anything for you alone. However, if you can get 2 of the same symbol, you get to choose from all these different upgrades that actually can help you monetarily or just give you points in the case that you can see that the game is actually going to go its entire length. We haven't talked about how the game can end prematurely. Well, I guess I just mentioned it, but war can end it, science can end it. I mean, there's, this game feels, it's a tense, it's race, you're racing to things, you're, the way the cards are drafted, we haven't gotten into that, but pick your pick. From all these topics I've thrown out, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I like about Duel the best, is that you have to be on your toes the entire game, because if you're not watching every single aspect of that game, somebody can, or the other player can just run with it, like run with war, run with science. They can take that game in quite a small number of moves comparatively. There is no, well, this game is going to take 3 rounds of 6 turns or 7 turns. That game can end, if you're not careful, that game can end very quickly.
We've had a few games that have ended in H2 because of war and because of science. And I said to Wes, when I play this game, like you said, I'm tense. I'm stressed the entire time, and I'm like constantly fuming in my head because I get screwed over all the time. But then when I do something and Wes is like, he just gets this irate look in his face, and sometimes he starts swearing, I'm just like, everything in me is so happy, and I know that I've done something right.
This is why
it's like the best
why
moment
we
of my
have
life.
board games. It's what board games are for. So
yeah, it's exactly it. And it's just, there's so many cool things, like you said, like with the progress tokens. We've had games where I've gotten a science match early in the game, and then I got the progress token where it said, okay, all of your wonders now cost you 2 less resources, and it was just like, that's the most amazing thing ever, because then you just go bam, bam, bam. Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's all racing. You have to be on your toes, like Wes said, and you have to constantly adapt your strategy.
Yeah.
Sure. And then the way that you're actually drafting cards here, the structures of these, like the way the game is filtered to me is quite interesting, because each age has a specific card structure that you build. Like, I think the game wants to give you lots of choices and lots of directions at the beginning of the game by making it sort of pyramid shaped, where you can choose anything from the bottom row, and you've got all these different choices. And every time you make a choice with a card, you have to kind of be like, well, do I really want to take that card? Because we're going to see a random card flip, and he's going to be able to get whatever he wants. Or maybe you know what card's underneath it. You can be like, I'm fine with giving him that. Or conversely, there's no way you're getting that one, man. That one's mine. I've already mapped out. You take one, I take one. You take one, I take one. You're giving that one to me.
Yeah, and then there's the mechanic of the replay based on your wonders. So you're watching how this structure is being dismantled as cards come off, and you see ahead of time, you're like, okay, there's no way I can get that card just the way it's worked out with who's going next. But I have a replay wonder.
Oh, yes!
So I set it up. Yeah. Bam! I play that card. I burn that card. New turn. I take the card that I was doomed to not get, and now I have it. And it's these little sneaky things that pop up, which make the game so interesting.
And that's another thing you have to really pay attention to, as well, as because you get the choice at the very beginning of the game. You set out 4 wonders, and one person picks 1, and then the second person picks 2, and then the first player gets the 4th one. But then you reverse that, so the opposite player gets to pick first in the second round. But you have to pay attention to the replays, because they're so important, and they can change the game so much.
Sad face if you don't take those replays.
yeah, it's totally detrimental to your game. But it's funny, like based on what Wes was saying, is we found after we played Seven Wonders Duel for a while, we started finding there was a pattern to it. And like we really enjoyed it as a game, but we started finding there's a pattern, and it's like, okay, we can almost kind of predict now who's going to get what card, or who's going to win based on who gets to go first in which round. And so when we started playing with Pantheon, we've never gone back, because Pantheon adds this extra element where you can start drafting cards from Pantheon, and you get all these different bonuses to it, and it totally changes whose turn it is and what cards you get to play.
Excellent transition. So Pantheon is the expansion to Seven Wonders Duel, and it adds an extra... This game series is just so interesting to me, because you got the board from the base game, and somehow it like interlocks with the expansion boards, right? Like these are clearly planned expansions from turn 1, from game 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just adds to the interestingness.
The allure.
The allure, yeah. Is that these things, like everything about these games, even Seven Wonders, like the art is just beautiful. It's so nice. It's such a nice looking game. It's kind of, the only other game that maybe surpasses that I've played is the Gallerist, in that, like, it's just, it looks like they spent a lot of time on the art, on making the everything work so nicely. Like even the box comes in. There's spots for every little piece, nice little like
Duel,
molded
yeah.
spots in Duel, and I find that I really love that about the game, is that it all was meant to be that way, and this is a great aspect of the game.
Yeah, the attention to detail is phenomenal, and that's something that I really appreciate about it, especially like Wes was saying, the art, and everything just flows. Everything has purpose, and everything links together, and that for me is what makes it a really great game. Is there's no excess fat, there's no unnecessary cards or things that you can just throw away and you never need. Everything is there, and it all has purpose.
Really, this discussion, like, because when Seven Wonders Duel first came out, it was a game that I played once, and I was like, I don't see what everybody's dropping there. I don't see what everybody's like getting so crazy about. But then more plays of it, like, it's one of those that you start to understand how this system works, how the tension from it, you can go further and further with it, and then the expansion adds even more ways that have never been explored before to continue to give you cards to draft from. I mean, there's not even that many cards in the expansion. I remember when I first bought this, as I recall, it is an expensive expansion, considering it costs almost as much as the base game, and it comes with basically 16 cards or 15 cards that are different, and then the other cards that are a part of it are kind of all just connected to one mechanism. But there's not that much content-wise, like component-wise, but there is so much there in terms of what you can do. Could you explain really quickly what the drafting and why you guys don't go back to base Duel after you've played Seven Wonders Pantheon?
Yeah, so further to what Whitney was saying, when after a few games, probably, I don't know, 20 or so games, we started noticing this pattern where, I guess it would be like a little bit of an unbalance in the game. I can't put my finger on exactly it, but somebody gets a decent lead by the end of the first round, they're going to win the game unless something really drastic happens. What I found with Pantheon is the Pantheon introduced a lot more randomness, a lot more like options for you to really change the game. And so if you are behind at the beginning of the first round, there's still a chance. You still have a really good chance because there's so many different options, and the other player can't stop you from doing all of them. You are going to be able to take some path, and that path might lead to victory, and that's what I kind of liked about it. And the way that it did that is by adding the Pantheon board, where these tokens get dropped on that layout, hidden initially, but then revealed, that allow you to pick certain. You get mythology tokens that allow you to select certain divinity cards and place them on the Pantheon board. That in the second round you're able to purchase these cards, and these cards kind of follow the same pattern of science, war, civics, commerce, and such, and wonders, and these just add different ways to really change the dynamic of the game, and you not only get to draft those cards.
They're big cards
Yeah, they
for
are.
you,
Yeah,
TC,
yeah,
so
okay.
you can stop complaining about
They're even
that.
bigger than they're even bigger than the ones in Seven Wonders, so they stand out quite a bit.
They're still not your great projects, TC. So now you could always supersize the game, though. Actually, I think that guy lives up in Seattle. The guy who does all the supersizing things on the Dice Tower. The guy that loves The Simpsons and makes the giant garbage can style cards.
I'm just
What Wes was
saying.
saying is it's really cool because it's got this. Cool. Sorry, go ahead.
TC,
Yes.
what? She said go ahead. What were you saying?
I said, in my old age, my vision isn't what it used to be. That's why I just want bigger cards. That's all.
All right.
They're much easier to hold. Yeah, but what I like about Pantheon, like what Wes is saying, is it's got the Pantheon board, and then every card that you place on there is a cost. So what's kind of neat is the mythology tokens are completely randomized in the first age. So you might not get all 5 of them, right? You might just get Mars, or you might just get Zeus, like the Greek mythologies, or you might just get Roman mythologies, and that really changes, what cards are available to you. But then what's neat is you get to choose where on the Pantheon board they go. Yeah. So if you end up with a divinity that you don't really like, and you get a crappy card, you're like, oh, sweet, well, I'm just going to put this in the cheapest slot from my opponent, which now is going to cost me 8 coins. I don't care about that. It's going to cost them 3, but then it screws them out of getting a really good card and putting it somewhere super cheap for them. And then what's even better is I think Wes kind of undervalues it, but I love the gate card. And that's the one card that, because you only get 5 of the mythology tokens, and then so whatever slot is empty is where you put the gate, and that for me is really cool because you get to turn up
double. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's expensive.
It's so expensive, but you get to pick one card. Like you flip up one card from every divinity, and then you get to pick whichever one you want and put into play. And that for me has really turned the game a couple of times. And I think Wes really undervalues it, but I think
expensive.
It's expensive, but it's worth it because you can get so many amazing abilities out of it.
Mm-hmm. What's really crazy to me is that when I first bought this expansion, I'm once again going to bring up this small amount of components here, but this time it's in a positive light because you're talking about you literally shuffle decks, of 3 cards, which we're not going to get into the whole 5,000 page comment discussion they had on BGG about whether or not you can technically shuffle 1 card. But the thing is, you're shuffling 3 card decks here, and you're shuffling 5 of them. But what I failed to realize when I was so shocked by I can't believe I paid $25 for this, was that what the game has done is, in lieu of giving me tons and tons of content and options, what it's given me is more control. Like the amount of control you have over not only, knowing where that card came from, what potential things it could be. Like there's a really good idea of what those cards are, even if you didn't get a chance to look directly at it. There's just so much control this game gives you in terms of what, because if you can know theoretically what cards are in every deck, especially once the first card comes off of there, you're like, well, if it's not this one, I know what the other 2 are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if you were the one that actually got to pick the divinity card to go onto the Pantheon board, you know what's on top. So you know what's going to flip with the gate card, for example.
Well, and I think what's crazy too is these cards impact your opponent, right? Like you can really mess up their game. Like there's cards that remove their resources. There's cards in there that steal their wonders from them, and if they don't expect that, if they're relying on that wonder or on that resource, it can really hinder their game.
Mm-hmm. And flavor-wise,
I'm with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm with you in the cost. Wes went out and bought the expansion, and I think it even cost us more because we're Canadian. Of course, everything costs more here. Mm-hmm. But I think Wes came home and he's like, "Oh yeah, I bought this." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like this is all we get out of it? What a ripoff!" But once I realized the impact that it had on the dual game, I was like, okay, totally worth the cost.
Mm-hmm. And Murr in our comments has said the same thing. He echoed that it is, it's once you do it, you never go back.
Yeah.
I was mentioning earlier the flavor here, Seven Wonders base game. None of the expansions really explored the mythology that is so interesting and that people take very, there are people who study and from a very young age, all the different mythologies, which in this case, there's the most interesting mythologies to me were Baal and the Phoenician gods, because I was not familiar with them. When I saw Zeus and Aphrodite, it's I know those. And then you even had Roman ones too, which is that put them in the 2 separate ones, but they had kind of, because they could kind of be mirror images of one another. They had different ones in each one. Roman more to focus on, I believe, more warlike, and then Greek, as I recall, is it more economic? No, Egyptians are more economic, I think, or Egyptian. I forget. Anyway.
Yeah. The Egyptians are kind of focused on the wonders, and then Greeks are more your points, and then kind of impacting how you do the the cards, and then I think it's the Phoenicians are more of the commerce.
Yeah, Phoenicians are commerce.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And Mesopotamia are the science.
It's really just interesting to see a card with Zeus on it, though. That wasn't explored in the Seven Wonders base game. So I'm very much behind that. there's another little piece that we haven't mentioned. I think about the way that these tokens, about the way that these cards get drafted, what's interesting is that a lot of times the game can become sort of like almost like it's a passing affair where it's like we both want this card that's underneath a different card. Neither of us is willing to take the card on top because it'll open us up to the opponent. And especially frustrating is when some of the cards come out face down, and the only way to know what they are is to reveal them by making them available. And sometimes you reveal a card and you're like, oh, come on.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what did I just give you?
And now...
I knew that was going to come up.
Yeah. But now you've actually got an incentive to reveal cards because now, yes, you're giving your opponent first crack at an unknown card, but you also get a chance to draft a deity card that goes up in the Pantheon. And that is an interesting balancing aspect.
Yeah, and also in the second age, you get those tokens to reduce the cost of the divinity cards. And those are tokens. those are especially valuable. So
because they can reduce the cost of your Pantheon cards, the divinity cards, up to 4 coins, like 2, 3, 4 coins. Like that's huge, especially if your gate is costing you 10 or 12 tokens. You can reduce
16.
that up to 16. You can reduce that by 4 coins, and that's a big power too.
It's huge. Mm-hmm.
I like that aspect of encouraging people to give somebody a reason to flip that card and expose it, because there's value in doing that.
Do you think that the replacement of guilds in the game is something that's lost a little bit? Because not all the guilds are played with when you play with this expansion. The guilds are usually that's one of the main things that offers some variability between game to game in Seven Wonders, but it's much maligned by players occasionally, by players that have gotten to the next level, because it's frustrating when an opponent gets rewarded for a strategy just because of what was in a guild. Here, what Pantheon adds to change the guilds, which reward you for things that you couldn't have really predicted, here instead, you've got a set collection going on with these different other cards, right? The way that it works is you get them real cheap, right? For if you have the tokens that you can pick up whenever you get the Pantheon cards, they can give you a discount later in the game if that specific card comes up, right? Am I remembering this correct? It's been a little while.
Yeah. So if you get one of the mythology tokens, like the Romans, and then one of the Roman, it's not a guild. I can't remember what it's called exactly. But if you get one of the the guild card per se,
it's a replacement for the guild card that's specifically in this expansion.
Their replacement card. Yeah, if you get the Roman one of those, and you have the Roman mythology token, then that card is free for you. That's a huge benefit too. Yeah, so that's a big chain. I don't mind them. They're okay, but the Grand Temples, that's what they're called. So if you get a Grand Temple card, then it could be free for you if you have the mythology token. And it's neat, and they stack as well, right? So it's 5, 12, 21 points, so it can be huge. But I really like the guilds in Seven Wonders, and the guilds in Pantheon are kind of neat. I think Wes and I realized that we were stupid and weren't playing them correctly. I don't know, a couple rounds in when we were like, oh, hey, actually, we can get more points and more coins based on whose it is. If you've got more, if you have more science than me, then the coins and the points come from you, not from me. That was kind of dumb of us. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I almost wonder if it would be interesting to just swap out the Grand Temple cards for guilds, go back to the base game, maybe keep Pantheon, but just not replace the guilds with the Grand Temple cards, and see how that goes. Because I do find that the Grand Temple cards, they're kind of boring, right? It's just stacked. I have 1, 5 points, 2, 12 points. It doesn't. Then there's nothing really to them. They're just straight points. I mean, even the cards are kind of boring. There's nothing really. No art on it. There's no meaning to it.
Those mythology tokens, in addition to not just getting to pick the card, it's just a further reward, further validate that strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. Maybe they replaced the guilds because the guilds were overpowered. I don't really know, but maybe we'll try that. Just swap back in the guild cards instead of the Grand Temple cards in a Pantheon game and see how that goes.
Interesting. Well, I had this sentiment, and I think we've pretty much cured it. But I still, part of me wonders, when I look at the top 10 games on Board Game Geek, at this point, 2 of them, and actually 3 of them, and probably more, number 1, and I believe number 2 and number 9 are all sort of like new and improved editions of a previously released game. And I wonder, to what degree is a rating changed or increased by when a player plays the game and they're already familiar with the system? Does that make any sense? Like if I've already played Pandemic and I try Pandemic Legacy, you're not going to get those people that dislike the game because the learning experience was frustrating, or like learning is just a dangerous experience with any game. If you get a bad teacher, or if you get somebody like in Pandemic's example, that plays the game for you,
or somebody the alpha gamer.
Yeah.
You just cost us a day by doing that. I thought we were having fun. Okay.
Is that what TC? TC, is that what you are? You're an alpha gamer?
No, I let people craft their own
opposite.
destruction. Yeah, I love people crafting their own destruction. I'm like, you sure? Okay.
TC actually actively counsels people to do the wrong thing. He's like the opposite of the alpha gamer. He plays on the side of the game in co-ops. He's turns every co-op into a traitor mechanism.
Well, yeah, with Pandemic Legacy,
so you're like a betrayal house in the hell.
Yeah, with Pandemic Legacy, I didn't mind when things went sideways. I'm like, oh, cool, we get to sticker the board and mess it up and rip open the box. And you mean I can't take that back? Nope. Oh, your character now gone.
Your character's dead. So, there's a lot of interesting things. There's so many different qualities that these games offer that I think that it's not exactly fair of me to say that that's the reason it gets an inflated rating, though I still think it could have something to do with it. It's what's crazy about it, though, is the system enticed people enough to check out this new game. What's new in Seven Wonders Duel got everybody to try it. There were things that it offered that was not just, like, hey, it's a new edition of Seven Wonders, this is what's different about it. You've got it, on the other side of that, you kind of have to reinvent the system to a point where people who already own it are going to feel the need to go out and get it. So maybe there's 2 edges to that sword that I wasn't acknowledging. So anyway, I planned to mention that earlier, but at this point, yeah, you guys have won me over.
Yeah, I agree with you though. It's probably a double-edged sword in that people are familiar with Seven Wonders already. Maybe they didn't like Seven Wonders because it was hard to learn, but they learned it. They have that bad taste in their mouth, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then Seven Wonders Duel comes along, and they're like, I'm familiar with this. I really actually do love this game. And so that gives them a bit of a jumping point. Not only that, but I think that there's an aspect of perfection, right? Seven Wonders came out. The 2-player variant maybe wasn't as great as it could be, but they learned from that, right? And they're like, okay, we're going to perfect this, right? So they're starting kind of on the shoulders of giants already, in that they've already got a great game. It's a little bit easier to make an even better game.
Absolutely.
I'm glad we convinced you, Joe. He drank the Kool-Aid. It's good juice.
I mean, as we were talking about Seven Wonders, then we moved on to Duel. Like, this discussion, just like everything we discussed about Seven Wonders, every time that you guys pointed out a little flaw, my brain went straight to, oh, they fixed that in Duel. Oh, they fixed that in Duel. It was just like, that's something that they added this new thing, they're just like, they added this tons of tension. And yeah, I think I got it behind me on the shelf right now. I got to go kick it out. The main thing, maybe just a big thing to drop. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but on that Seven Wonders board, you've got the little extra little place that you can attach the Pantheon that slides in perfectly. But I don't know if you noticed, there's some little divots on the opposite side. And if Mount Olympus is the Pantheon, and then the ground, the ground level that you play the game on is the one that the game starts on, well, the only other direction to go is.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we're gonna have an Underworld expansion of some sorts. I'm gonna call it. I think it looks like that. I think maybe I've even heard that somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I'm just.
Yeah, I agree. There's little notches there just to lock in. Yeah.
Yeah, those aren't unintentional. Those are. We're gonna feel like, ooh, yes. When it comes out, you're gonna just sit there with all three of those pieces of cardboard, sliding them together and sliding them apart. It's like it fits so perfectly.
Well, I think another thing that Seven
now
Wonders
stirred the
Duel, Seven Wonders Duel has that Seven Wonders doesn't is a price point. For $30, you're getting a full game instead of just an expansion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of game for $30 for a 2-player game. I remember when I broke that sucker, I'm like, this is just $30. Holy cow!
Yeah,
there's a lot in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in a day and age where board games are like 40, 50, 60 bucks, right? There's such a huge investment.
Yeah, like a Gloomhaven, what, 140? Oh, it's something for 30? Oh, that's pocket change. Hang on. Yeah, shoot, man. Even if I don't like it, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, is there any last little things you would like to mention about Seven Wonders or Seven Wonders Duel? Anything to say to those that still haven't been converted over to your side like me?
Oh, you gotta try it.
Yeah, it's worth trying, especially at $30. And it's a really solid 2-player game, and I think that's one of my biggest draws to it is that Whitney and I can play it, and we do over and over and over again, and it's something. Yeah, like most of our games have 2-player options, two-player variants, like Seven Wonders, but the 2-player variant is kind of it's doable, but yeah, this is for 2 people, designed for 2 people, and it's on point.
Yeah, Duel for me is Duel embodies a near perfect 2-player game for me. It is one of my favorite games. It is an amazing game. There's so many amazing components about it. And if people don't want to buy it, then I would tell them to go to a board game cafe. Go try it there. Learn it there and see if you like it. And then you can buy it.
Yeah, and it's also good at strengthening a marriage. If you can make it through a Duel game, you can make it through anything.
Definitely a lot more interactive than the base game. So, yes, congrats to the both of you.
Yeah.
I'm going to now try it with my wife, and I blame you both in advance.
So we'll help you along.
You'll counsel us through it. Okay.
Yeah, we'll counsel you through it. Yeah.
You just gave me a great transition opportunity. I appreciate that because you mentioned board game cafes, and in Edmonton, where you both are located, you recently on your website, the hexagamers.net, I believe, is it? Hexagamers.net. Oh, is it .com? Okay, I'm sorry. Hexagamers.com.
That's okay.
You've just recently did a posting on all the different board game cafes that are available in Edmonton. Now, I'd like you to talk about that, but also, could you please, here's your chance to just plug your guys, shameless plug. Tell us all about what Hexagamers is and how it started and, what's to look for and expect for on that website.
Hexagamers.com is kind of a catch-all for all things games. So we're 6 friends, and we get together, we play games all the time, and we go to escape rooms, we go to board game cafes, and we get to know everybody. We rate them, we review them, and we go back over and over and over again. So we've got lots of reviews on our site for escape rooms, for board game cafes, and for board games as well. But we also have a lot of different angles. So we talk about strategies, we talk about simplified plays, we also talk about alternative plays, and we have started getting into gifts ideas as well. So we have board game related gifts for Christmas, and we have the best board games of 2017. We have a lot of different stuff on there. So if it's anything board games related, if it's anything games related, you're going to find it on our site. You're going to find it on hexagamers.com. And really what we want to do is have fun with it. That's our main objective. We want to be able to open up the community to everyone. We want to make it accessible. We want to make it fun. And we want people to interact with it because it's such an amazing community. And there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. It's not just board games. It's all things games. And I think that's really what we want to get into and what we want people to see is that it's not just this geeky hobby anymore where you sit in the basement and play Dungeons and Dragons. There's so many different games out there that really cater to every personality and every style of play.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that we're kind of in the midst. It's been going on for a while, but in the midst of a kind of a golden age of gaming, board gaming in particular, and it's just exploding. It's been exploding for quite a while now. But I think there's still room to get more people involved, get more new blood, new ideas, get more money into the industry. Like the more people that are building games, the better games we're going to get, and I think it's just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, where it's just like, more people, better games, more people, and I think it's just a fantastic thing. Yeah.
Except in Seven Wonders, only one will win, and the other one gets the couch.
And I will win, and Wes will lose.
History says otherwise, but
well, if you win too much, though, you gotta be careful, Whitney. You can't beat him every single time, because then you're gonna stop playing.
Well, see, that's why we switched over to duo, because now he wins a little bit and he feels better, and we all win.
And aren't you glad we did? It's much better.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so we're only the two of Pexa Gamers, but there's 6 of us, and we love everything games, and we really appreciate you guys having us on your podcast.
Yeah,
sure.
It's been fantastic having you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's just been excellent. It's been a great discussion for a great game. I appreciate all the inclusivity you guys are bringing. Specifically, that's the type of thing that my wife needs. She needs resources like that, and I need to, look at what type of things you guys are doing, because occasionally I can become, the troll that's just sitting down here in the basement. So I definitely appreciate the inclusivity that you guys are definitely, you're preaching, for lack of a better term, whatever. Anyway, quickly here before we sign off, I'd like to remind all of our listeners that we are sponsored by Game Surplus. GameSurplus.com is an online board game store and will provide you the best customer service, better than you would ever come to expect from an online store of any sort. So check them out. Carmen, games@gamesurplus.com is the email. He will track down any game that you're looking for. As a matter of fact, he is up to that right now with Jeff Gamble, the guy that started this whole epic
insanity
catastrophe. Is it now? Is the long?
I like catastrophe. Spring Rat comes to mind.
Extravaganza. I don't know. Yeah. This the Longview podcast was started by Jeff Gamble, and Carmen and Jeff are over in Essen at this moment. They are over in Essen checking out all these new games, and historically, Carmen has brought over games you could not find anywhere else, where he's taken the risk, and the customers of Game Surplus have reaped the rewards. So check out how his inventory shifts here in his return from Essen, because he's going to be finding things that aren't just out there everywhere. So add to that the great customer service, the low shipping threshold. It's the best place for you to find and buy games online, and beats out a lot of those local friendly game stores as well, because Carmen is a gamer, and he sometimes joins us when we're here, and he'll be on an episode of one of the podcasts that me and TC do together.
He has to be on a quick view. I keep harassing him.
So anyway, you'll get to hear from him about the actual Essen experience. So anyway, thank you very much. Check out your games from GameSurplus.com. If you like the Long View, that's the way to support the Long View. So, TC, this has been good.
Yep.
Whitney, Wes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, TC.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd love to be back
thanks so
on.
much.
Anytime.
Thanks so much to all of the listeners, and thank you very much for continuing for your support of the Longview as we've transitioned from Jeff to the new guard. And we hope that this has been an enjoyable episode for you. And if you are interested in participating in things with the Longview, or you'd like to talk about what direction you'd like to see this podcast head, check us out there on our guild number. TC said it in the intro, right?
Yeah,
so check us out on
whatever I
Board
said
Game
the intro, it's there. Yeah, guild.
Go back to
Board Game
Guild.
Geek.
It's 1325. I'm so used to saying the one for the other podcast for the Good Board Actors. Anyway, just check out the Longview one. Anyway, that's all we have for you tonight. I'm Joe Sallin, and I appreciate you guys listening. Have a great time gaming, and catch us on the next episode of the Longview.
Thanks for listening to The Longview. The Longview is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Go to punchboardmedia.com to check out all of our fantastic content, including the good, the bored, and the ugly, the state of games, and of course, ourselves. The Long View is also supported by our listeners. We'd like to thank our listeners and encourage them to contact us to be on our show. You can, of course, get a hold of us at thelongview@gmail.com, on Twitter at thelongview, and of course, you can just visit our guild on Board Game Geek. We'd love to hear from you, and more importantly, we'd love to have you on the show. This has been The Long View, and thank you for listening.
What are you? Where do you come from?
Where am I from?